Hello there, welcome back to another show. Today I'm looking at the Mad Max series, the George Miller Mad Max quadrilogy, I suppose now. But there's going to be a fifth one with Mad Max called Furiosa. So it's a whole world basically where Mad Max is almost like the entry point. So I watched them all recently. They've all come out in 4K. Gorgeous transfers, especially in the later films. They look really good. And it was always a series I really liked, because since I managed to watch on a projector, you get to see a lot more of the world and the filmmaking. And you get to appreciate the films a lot better than I did in the past. Now, there's two that are just perfect. I mean, basically, Road Warrior and Fury Road are two perfect action movies. They're just so good. They're basically, this is how you do an action movie. I mean, so much I've watched Road Warrior twice this year on projector, so I'm really into that film this year. And the big nice thing is how good the two flawed ones are, like Mad Max and Beyond Thunderdome, is even though they've got problems, they're still far superior to most action movies. They're still really good. Mad Max especially jumps up quite a bit when you see it in the projector and you see it in the big screen and see just how well made it is. Because it does have the most conventional plot. It is an exploitation plot. So the first one, Mad Max, was made for a very limited budget, where they had some good stunt people and some good car crashes, but basically had an inexperienced cast, which they had to get from the local, just whoever was available. And like Mel Gibson was Max, and he was just graduated from acting school, so he was as green as possible. His pal in the film was his pal in real life, apparently, because they were both acting together. And they brought in the villain Toe Cutter, who was also in the Fury Road as a villain. Hugh Kearns Mate or something, I can't remember his name. He was brought in. He was the thespian they brought in. He was the guy that actually brought in to actually provide the acting because they didn't really have much money beyond that. It was like, we don't have much money for actors, so we'll hire one good actor as a villain and hope for the best of the rest of them, because the rest of them are inexperienced. But that worked out really well because everyone else is rough, but the characters are rough, so it doesn't matter. I mean, the funny thing is Mel Gibson's probably the weakest out of the whole bunch in this first film. He got a lot better really quickly for Road Warrior. Like there is a massive jump in acting ability and skill from Mad Max to Road Warrior. It's a huge jump. I think he'd made some other films in between that point and it's a lot more experience, but there is a massive jump because some of the acting in Mad Max, you can tell he just graduated, is the best way to put it. There's awkwardness at times. Other times he's fine, but sometimes there's awkwardness when he's trying to do like romance scenes with his wife. You just tell he's still finding his feet as an actor. Is the best way to put it. But the part itself is about a guy who's uncomfortable with family life and try to embrace it. So even the awkwardness of the acting actually kind of helps the story. So it works out fine. But it is kind of watching it in the big screen, it's obvious that he's very green as an actor at this point. I mean, I think even Mel Gibson fans would admit that one. You know, it's just like, yeah, he was learning. His pal Goose was a lot more fun. He was just a more enjoyable performance overall. And a lot of the performances are way over the top but really enjoyable. Like all the villains pretty much are allowed to just go way over the top as much as possible, as long as they were still threatening. I mean, there's the Toe Cutter's sidekick is this very camp guy who's kind of a bit bitchy, but also menacing at the same time. Like, you knew he would kill anybody, so it really worked. Toe Cutter is the most fun villain you can have, until some other villains come in in the sequels. But he's like articulate, sadistic, and weird. And it's just like almost like they turned the camera on and said, okay, do something weird. Just do something fun. And he would always deliver. I mean, he doesn't have that much to do in the film. It's just like we hire a good actor and let him provide the atmosphere of evil that will be enough to permeate the film. You know. Yeah, in a weird way, it's kind of like Sauron from Lord of the Rings in the sense that his henchmen do more than he does, but what he does is enough, and the atmosphere he brings to it is enough for the film. And there's some terrific action. I mean, the whole idea was Max is it's not post-apocalyptic yet. It's much more the civilization's breaking down. This first film, there's a lot of psychos around that need to be arrested. Max is a cop. A bunch of other cops are all taking down these criminals who are all bikers and stealing cars and things and doing horrible stuff. And it starts a war because the first guy he takes down beginning of the film has friends and is one of the toe cutters men. So they come out to the outback for revenge for their fellow friend who died. And so cause Max is the one who takes him down, they target Max and the people around him. And there's all sorts of just weird developments. But basically, the first half is car chases as they first basically clash. Then, basically, Goose, Max Powell, gets burnt alive in a really gruesome sequence. And then Max quits the force and says, like, I can't do this anymore. Because he's starting to feel like one of those people because he's out so much on the road. Taking him out, because they have to take him out in the most brutal form way possible because these guys are psychos now. So there's no, like, trying to be nice about them. You have to just basically kill them. And it's affecting him. So he goes away with his family. While he's away, they run into Toe Cutter's gang and his family is murdered. Max goes for revenge and takes them out one by one. That's basically the film. It's a revenge film. First half set up, second half the tragedy happens and Max gets revenge. That's it. Exploitation. There's tons of these in the 70s, but very few done as well as this. Because you get the first half, you get the setup of the environment of this world that isn't quite the apocalypse yet, but is getting there, and things have obviously gone wrong. This is the tipping point. It's like, you feel this is like 3 months away from whatever happened that turned everything into the end of the world. Like, we're at that tipping point, really. And everything's just out of control. And there's just a sense of evil from this gang of bikers. It's the big thing of seeing this in a projection rather than a small screen, where on a small screen, you don't get the same atmosphere. On the big screen, when they go after his wife, there's this atmosphere of evil, the way the camera moves, you see her in the landscape. It's just a really well done. It's obviously done by a director of talent. This is George Miller's first film, and you can tell instantly he had talent. He knew what he was doing. He knew where to put the camera. He knew how to edit quickly, so that maybe not being the best actor didn't really affect you that much because the style of it would keep it going, and the pacing and the craftsmanship of the film keep it going. I mean, the big thing is the stalking of Max's wife on TV is probably the most boring part of the film. There's no car chases and it's like, it's nothing. You see it in projected, it's pretty scary because just the atmosphere, it actually does. You can need the big screen for that, man, because it's so well directed, but it's directed for a big screen experience. In the small screen, it loses a lot. It's like well done, but it doesn't really have the same kick to it, which is kind of the problem with the film, as you do need to see the big screen. A lot of its charms is in the big screen because the plot is basic, but it's what the director does with the plot that really makes it work. The action scenes with all the car chases, the revenge on them. And a good thing in this one is, the good thing in all of them is Max is not invincible. He gets his ass kicked a lot in these films. And in each film you see him progress a little bit more. So he's never exactly the same character. Which in most sequels you get the same character again and again. This one, no. You watch from first to second to third to fourth. The character progresses a lot. So that's the first one. First one is very enjoyable. But it gets over. It's because it's followed by such a great sequel. It's the underrated one, because it's one of those ones where the sequel's so good that it's like the first one was good, but not amazing like this one. The second one is like the apocalypse has happened. People are in retreat. You have to fight for fuel. and a group of survivors have found this fuel source in the middle of the desert, and they have some cars and some vehicles. So they're pumping for the oil, and they're going to go to the coast. They think it'll be better for them on the coast. They might be safer. But their find has been discovered by these bunch of psychos, this gang of psychos who are sucking the town and wants the oil. Into this comes Max, who wants the petroleum to keep going, because he's basically a drifter at this point. He's just going from place to place, finding petrol and moving on. He's basically burnt out. This is the most cynical you ever see the character. He really is burnt out in this one. After what happened in the first one, it's like his family died, then the apocalypse happened, and he has no time for people. And basically, he's trying to strike a deal with these people to get as much petrol as he can carry, and he'll help them out. Initially, he tries to take back one of the people who was captured. He takes them back. But first, the person dies, so the deal's off. So then he says, okay, you need a truck. You need a front truck to pull this petroleum. I know where one is. It's a day's walk away. If I get that, you give me some petroleum. And they're like, fine, go do it. So he does it. Comes back with it. At this point, there's been a lot of enemies of all these bikers trying to take these people out. And it is like a fort situation. They're always trying in behind the barricades, always, and they're getting burnt alive and stuff by the people who are defending. So there is a kind of feeling of Middle Ages and knights trying to please their masters, and it's just brutality, but with cars. Basically, Max then gets away, gets injured, his car blows up, he's taken back to the encampment and drives the truck out for the... At that point, he's actually kind of burnt through his... burnt through the citizen back towards humanity. He has to help these people, even though he doesn't really want to, but it's the decent thing to do. He has been injured. They have shown him some kindness, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do that good thing. And it leads to one of the great action scenes ever, where he's driving the truck, and all of these cars are trying to get on the truck and stop it, and, and it's utter brutality. And it's something you need to see on the big screen to get the full effect. It's really good on TV, but the big screen really makes a difference. And the whole film's like that again. It's like, you need the big screen to see what George Miller's doing with some of these compositions and editing. Because, again, it's a very simple story. But just the way it's directed. Like, everything's very straightforward. It's all from Max's point of view. You never see anything that's not Max's point of view. The whole story's told from his point of view, with a voice at the beginning and end, and telling giving you what's happened before and after the main story. But it's his point of view of surviving. And so early on he meets up with Bruce Spence's air captain guy, who is, also, like Max, trying to survive on his own. They have a kind of Clint Eastwood, Eli Wallach kind of relationship where Max abuses him and outsmarts him all times. But he's a bit more kind-hearted than Eli Wallach was in Good, Bad and Ugly. And he saves Max a few times, even though Max probably doesn't deserve it. And he's got this flying machine that actually can use to drop bombs on the villains at a certain point. So they create a nice little bond, even though they're both trying to survive. Just that the air captain guy isn't quite as cynical as Max is. He has this area of cynicism, but in some ways he is still quite good-hearted, even though he's trying to survive. And just dealing with all these people and through these situations of trying to get the petroleum, it failing, trying another way to get the petroleum, but doing it in a way that's treating the people, unlike the guys trying to get into the compound. Max is willing to offer services for the petroleum. He's not trying to steal it from them. He's just trying to say, I'll do this for you if you give me this. That's fine. The villains want to, led by Lord Humongous, the Ayatollah of rock and roller. He's just trying to steal and kill everybody. He's just the big bad villain. Vernon Wells has the amazingly camp, but sadly scary sidekick villain who will do anything to anybody. It's just utterly brutal. And you've all these just great sequences of Max either getting into the compound or getting back out and then getting back in. It should be boring, but it's not, because every time you do it, it's something very different motivation all the time. And it's so well directed that nothing ever looks the same. Even though it's pretty much one area they're filming the whole time, it always looks different and always looks unique and just wonderfully done. These films are hard to describe in a way because they're so visual, but you have to see the biggest screen possible. But Mad Max Road Warrior is just a stunner, and just the final 20 minutes is just a knockout. You also have the Theo kid as well, who's got a boomerang that can kill people. He's a great character as well, because he's fond of Max. Max always has to try to get rid of him for his own safety. You know, there's all these weird characters. There's the guy in charge of the guys with the fuel, who's a bit pompous, you know, and Max has to deal with him, and it's like, I have to deal with this guy. You know, he's like a character you want to see someone punch, but he's needed for the people trying to escape. You need someone who's that pure, but also in this world where everything's very impure. You just stand out a little bit. But everything is terrific in this film. This is just a wonderful film. If you haven't seen it, shame on you. You just have to see it. It's just so good. But if you've got the biggest screen possible, watch the biggest screen possible, because you really will appreciate it. It's just something you can't quite experience the right way on a small screen. Now we get to Beyond Thunderdome. This was the film after Road Warrior was a massive hit. I mean, Mad Max did really well. Mad Max was so low budget and made a massive profit, which led into the sequel, because they'd actually money to do stuff they wanted to do in the first film. And it was two people basically making it. It was George Miller and Byron Kennedy. They were a partnership. And then, as they were doing pre-production on Mad Max 3, Byron Kennedy died in a helicopter crash, which set everything off, which created a lot of problems in a sense, because he'd half the creative force gone from the film instantly. And so George Miller had to, after grieving, he had to actually reassemble the film plans, do something that interested him so it was different from the first two films, and, you know, just organise and bring in new collaborators. That's probably why this is the weakest of all the films. Because there are things, it was like, if you had someone working who was strong as well, they would say, no, you can't do that. Or this is going too long. You know, there's certain things that are interesting, but they last too long, or they haven't worked out the logic enough for them. But that takes away from what's great with the film. The film is still wonderful. The film is still, it's a very underrated Mad Max movie. Because, I mean, I think everyone agrees the first 45 minutes of this film is just wonderful. And it jumps on from Road Warrior. Road Warrior, Max has actually regained some humanity. He's still a survivor. He's still cynical. Like, he's always planning ahead, making sure he knows where he's going to go at any point. But he's less cynical. He's obviously less cynical now. He can deal with people in a slightly better way. And basically he gets all his stuff stolen the first minute of the film. Basically he's got animals which is now pulling all his stuff across the desert. You know, he's basically they've gone beyond cars. There's very little petroleum left at this point, and you have to find animals to help you get across the desert. So you have to find a new way to survive. So he's doing it, and he's still a loner. He's still trying to work himself out, but he ends up getting stuff stolen. He finds Bartertown in the area he's at, so he goes to Bartertown, try to find his stuff because he figures that's where they took it. Bartertown says, "Okay, we know who stole it. The only way we'll let you have it back or replace the stuff you lost is if you do us a favour." And that's Bartertown's led by Tina Turner, who is basically she's kind of in it just to have another big face, another big name. She's okay. She's entertaining, but it's a part where you needed someone really scary, and she's not really scary. You needed someone terrifying here, and she doesn't really have that. So basically, she's the charge of Bartertown, but she's got a problem Master Blaster who runs the methane, which powers the whole thing, which is basically pig shit. And he's basically a genius small guy who has this big muscular guy who he sits on top of, who's Blaster, who can beat up anybody who's huge. And they've kind of got too big for their boots because they can turn the power off anytime they want, and they're and a kind of war's coming between both of them. Like they need the kind of Turner character to run Bartertown, but they also need the power. And both sides think they're the top person. So Max is brought in to challenge Master Blaster to a fight in Thunderdome, which Thunderdome's a big thing where they say basically the world was ruined by laws and complicated laws and all this, a bunch of nonsense. So if you have a problem, you go into the Thunderdome and you solve it. Two men enter, one man leaves, type of thing. Like, yeah, that's the way you solve the problems of society now. So Max picks a fight with Master Blaster, figures out what the flawed Master Blaster is, and then you have a great sequence where he has to fight in the Thunderdome against Master Blaster, and you've got all these swinging ropes and things, and they've got weapons all over the place above, so you have to swing up and get the weapons. Best action scene in the film, by a mile. And at the end of it, he defeats Master Blaster, but he finds out the Blaster is actually just a mentally handicapped young man who's very muscular. So he doesn't need to be killed, he just needs to be given better instructions. But Tina Turner, because she kills him anyway, because he's been taken down, and also because Max actually said, hey, we had a deal, and she didn't want anyone to know she did a deal because she'd lose a lot of power. She gets revenge on Max and puts him out in the desert without any water and just to die in the desert. Max gets found by children who also were part of a plane crash and then escape from the cities, as the world fell. The pilot and some of the adults went off to try and find help, and obviously they died. They're waiting for the adults to come back home, but the only adult they find is Max, so they think he's Captain Walker, and he's not. He has to tell them, no, I'm not this person. And you've got paradise here, you should just stay, you'll be fine. Some of them want to see the world, so they end up traveling over the desert, and they end up leaving that area one night, and Max and some people have to go back and go and help them to get them back. They get near Bartertown. They have to sneak into Bartertown to get some supplies, to be able to trek back. They get seen. There's a big fight, there's a big chase at the end where they nick Master, because he's got all the knowledge. At this point he's been treated badly, and they just try and escape, and at least the big chase at the end, they're trying to Master back. And it ends up having Bruce Spence back as another pilot character. Now this all sounds kind of messy. It is. There's no master plot. The Tina Turner character should have been scarier and brought something in the second half more than just this story of these children. The children's story is actually done well because it shows you what the problems are. These kids have no real memory. They've survived because they've been put in this isolated spot where there's some old enough to find food, and they've kept the kids going, but it's only a temporary solution. And it's really well done, but there's a massive drop in suspense there. Because it's like, well, what's the problem to solve? And the problem to solve is they're curious, and Max has to deal with them. And it ends up getting everyone in trouble. And there's just a palpable lack of suspense in the second half of the movie, until we get back to Bartertown and they have to escape. But even then, it's an escape. But you've been gone so long from Tina Turner's character, it's less of a threat, ultimately. And there's a big chase at the ending, and you know what they're fighting for, and there's some great sequences here. There's a lot of nice slapstick done, inspired by, silent film. and Buster Keaton stuff. There's some great stuff here, but there's no real narrative drive from start to end that's actually really pushing forward. And I think that's the big problem people have with the film is it's just like there's a lot of great bits in it, but it's like there's the story itself is like two different films put together. It's like you start one film, stop it, start another film, then stop it, then smash it together at the end and have a fight scene to resolve it. And it's like there's so much good stuff. I mean, the stuff with the kids is actually really wonderful, but it stops the film and it just creates a problem. And the stuff with Max and Bartime is great. You've seen how everything's evolved without fuel, how things have moved on, how Max has moved on. And then you see him, the kids, he's moved on a bit more as well. So it's interesting as his character thing. It's just like, as a narrative, it's not quite as good. But it has some wonderful stuff. It has a great bit at the end where we see the broken cities where they've travelled to, and you see a new society growing up. And the suggestion is Max has helped these civilizations slowly grow from the second and third film. But just narratively, it's not as quite as good. But it's got a lot of some of the most quotable bits from the series in this film. It's just needed a plot that supported it better. It needed another draft or two and just tightened it. You know. I mean, it might have been better to have Max to meet the kids first, then end up embarking with a few of the kids and then having to escape from there, and that would probably been a better end, because you'd have had an early start where you'd have actually found something very surprising, and then you could have actually gone into danger and accumulated danger bit by bit. Here it just feels like it's two stories that aren't meshing right. But it's still a wonderful film. I still highly recommend it. Just know it's a flawed film. Finally, we have Fury Road, which is a great return to form. I mean, after doing Thunderdome, Mad Max series just had died. Thunderdome didn't do that well. The other two did. So there was less demand, and George Miller wanted to move on to do other stuff. He did Butch of Eastwick. He did Lorenzo's Oil. He did the Babe films. Happy Feet. He did a bunch of films because he does variety of stuff. He doesn't just do the same thing. He's a terrific director. He was, he just did his own thing for a while. But eventually he started to come back to the idea of doing another Mad Max film. He started to come up with some ideas. Eventually it's better to star Mel Gibson again. Then Mel Gibson had his meltdowns in public, so they changed that idea. And because the character Max has become more and more like a host of films rather than being the central protagonist. Last time he was really the central protagonist was the second one. It meant you could put him in with another strong character. That's what they kind of did here. And they cast Tom Hardy. Now, Mel Gibson was a good Max, especially in Road Warrior. But I've got to admit, I like Tom Hardy's Max more. Because, first of all, I think he's just a more interesting, quirky actor. He's more to my taste. So that's a taste thing. I just like him better as Max. But also, at this point, Max has actually become a bit insane. This is years later now. Things have gone on much longer. Things have been going on for like 20 years now. Like, at the early Mad Max films, he was... it's a few years in. Things had changed. But you could class it as the first 10 years of this problem. And now it's been going for 20 odd years. So it's a big difference. Max has been out in the desert for so long now, he barely speaks. You know. Like, whatever grace he had from Thunderdome, it's all gone. He's just barely surviving. He barely speaks. He gets caught in this one area by these marauders who work for Joe, who's the big guy, Immortal Joe, who runs this paradise, basically, where they found a water supply and there's some greenery. So basically people survive there, but Joe runs it so that he has the whole power. So he's got his brothers and two different things. You have the guys making the bullets, you've got the guys with the fuel, basically, the refuelers, and you've got Joe with the food and stuff like that, and he's basically the one who runs it. And he's got his brides. So it's anybody who's been born without any deformities from the nuclear radiation basically is taken by Joe when they're young, and it's a female, and they're basically groomed to be his brides and be the mothers of his children. So he's played the same character as Toe Cutter, but much more dignified, very different performance. And he's a total scumbag. He has this town under his thumb. Like, anybody who's below him, below his paradise, basically has to beg for water and basic food from him. He keeps everyone under his thumb. All the people have grown up, all the kids who have grown up in the post-apocalyptic wasteland, a lot of them become his warrior boys who are, started off as boys, became teenagers who, a lot of them have nuclear, a lot of cancerous tumours and things, and a lot of them aren't going to make it, but they all want to go to Valhalla. He brought back the myths of Valhalla to say immortality awaits you if you join me and join my religion, basically. So he's basically created this toxic area where only the boys will have to be his slaves, but also his warriors, and the women are basically his lovers, or will do whatever he wants. He's even milking some bigger women for their milk, you know. He also, within this comes Max, and he's been caught, and at a certain point, Furiosa, who's played by Charlize Theron, escapes with his bride and his war machine, basically, and it's a chase from then on to get them back. Max is stuck in the front of a car for the first 20 minutes of the film as a blood supply unit for Nicholas Holt's character, who's dying of various diseases, but he's one of the drivers. He's a war boy, and basically we're watching Max get from that situation to get on the truck to have a very difficult relationship with Furiosa to start with before they start trusting each other. They all have to escape with the brides and deal with this massive chase of all these warriors coming after them. It's basically a chase movie. So it gets rid of the problems of the third one where it starts and stops. This is like a chase movie. And for the first hour and a half, it's a chase movie going one way, and then they turn back and go through all their enemies and to solve their problems. It's amazing. It's so good. I mean, the world setup is so good. The first 20 minutes, you actually understand the entire world, most of it without dialogue, just by what people are doing, what the design of the world is. You can just understand the mechanisms. So you also understand how grave the situation is and why Max and Furiosa, who should trust each other, don't at the start, because they've both dealt with really difficult, awful people throughout. And since Max has been through quite a few other movies you haven't seen, where people have died. Maybe he's got another family that had died as well, because originally it was a wife and son, and this one it seems like a young girl who's died is haunting him. So it could have been another family got in the wasteland, or it could have been people who's trying to help in the wasteland. You never quite know. And people say, oh, it's a different Max because it's a daughter around a son. But you never quite know, because 20 years have passed. It could have been, or it could have been somebody who's very close to who died. You never quite know if it's meant to be the same Max or not, or whatever. But you just assume it is. But it's a different interpretation. His character has been broken really badly at this point. He's not just broken a bit like in Road Warrior, where he was probably his most cynical. Now he's mad, probably. He actually is crazy here. And Tom Hardy's great at that, because he barely says a word throughout, but you get exactly what he means always. And Theron's great as well as Furiosa. She's another one who's very haunted by her past. She doesn't say that much, but what she does say is always important. So these actors apparently did not get on during filming, which is amazing because they're so good together in this film. And everyone's good in this film. Everybody's great. But it is a film about the chase. And it's about the relationship between people built up through adversity as they try and avoid getting killed and deal with the chase and deal with all these crazy buggers. It is pretty much the Mad Max movie with a mega budget, and it's just one last chase. But the action, what I said about the Road Warrior, the action always varies, so you never see the same thing again and again. Even though it's a chase, there's so many variations you find a chase that they find. So they start off with a big chase, with lots of crazy stuff. And then they vary it. You have chases with bikes, chases with big trucks, chases with snipers, dealing with the landscape, dealing with sand, dealing with mud as they try to escape, dealing with all the elements, starting and stopping, going through mountain ranges, things like that. So they vary everything up, so there was always something new in the stunts. There's always something different going on. There's always a progression of character through the stunts. You basically see Max going from being by himself to dealing with Furiosa and dealing with the characters, to start to actually have some affection for them. And then finally talking them around to actually saying that there's only one place you can have any hope, and that's where you came from, which means going right through them all, blowing up this one area that in the mountain range, which means if you blow that up, they cannot get back. And by the time they even get near you again, you've taken back over their compound, so that they're going to have to rot. And it's just amazing. I've watched this film so many times. It's just amazing. Again, it's another one seen as big a screen as possible. It's wonderful. And it's just like one sequence after another of great stuff. And just minimal dialogue, but you're getting a lot. And you get a sense of like Furiosa and Max are both very tortured people who understand, once they've spent a bit of time together, understand that they're very similar. They both get really traumatic pasts that can never truly be solved. You know, they can help other people, but they can't truly be. They're basically broken people, which makes it moving because of two broken people trying to do something to make the world slightly better. Even though Max really has to be pushed into it more than anything. But once he has no choice, he will come through. Now, a lot of people said Max was actually underplayed in this one, in the sense that it was more Furiosa's film. Well, she's a dramatic focus, the same way as the kids were in the third film. But Max is the one who always makes the changes to the story. It's his intervention early on that allows her to actually escape. Like, she would not have escaped if Max wasn't there. It would have been a doomed folly, basically. She would not have survived without Max. And he's the one who ultimately, once all her plans are crushed, finds a new solution. So he is kind of supporting play in a sense that they give Furiosa the big dramatic arc, but Max is really important. He's a guy who figures a lot of stuff out. And you find a lot more stuff about him as he goes on, just how crazy he is, how traumatic his past has been. And he's basically just trying to survive day to day. It's just wonderful. It's just a wonderful film. Probably a favourite, to be honest, even though Road Warrior is amazing too. But I think because I like Tom Hardy's Max more than I like Mel Gibson's Max, that's probably the thing that pushes it over the top. You know, I just like his interpretation of the part more. That's just me. But Road Warrior and Fury Road are just amazing. I mean, if you don't like them, you have a problem. Really. It means you don't like action movies. And the other two, Mad Max and Thunderdome, are still excellent. They're still really well put together films. But of all of them, see them all on the big screen, because this is a director, George Miller, directs films for the big screen. He plans his shots out, he thinks them through. He's not doing just coverage, he's always covering things for dramatic editing, pushing forward. He doesn't repeat shots, he's always moving forward. So everything's got an impact. So, yeah, Mad Max films are wonderful. Go see them. As you probably tell, I've ran you on quite a while about how great they are. So, I couldn't help it. They're just so good. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be doing a Christmas video at some point about the best of the year. But there's still a few films I haven't seen yet that I want to see before I get there. So, that may be a bit late. That may be after Christmas before I can get to that. We'll see. I'll be back later with some more videos. Bye for now.